Imagine you have to land a 5-story building. Not draw it, not push it, land it. Gently onto a narrow strip of concrete at about 160 miles an hour in a crosswind that's trying to shove the whole thing sideways. And you have to do it so smoothly that the wheels kiss the ground without a jolt. Because behind you sit hundreds of tons of cargo or hundreds of people. That is exactly the job of the person who lands the biggest airplane in the world. When a heavy jet rolls on to final approach, the pilot's eyes are about 50 feet, 15 meters, above the ground. That's a 5th-floor window. And the main wheels, the ones that are about to touch concrete, are hanging just 10 feet, 3 meters, over the runway. Between what the pilot sees and what's about to touch down, there's roughly 4 stories of empty air, straight down. The pilot sits way up front, on the nose, and the airplane stretches far below and behind him. Now take one of the Antonov giants. The An-124 Maria stood about 60 feet, 18 meters, tall. That's a 6-story building. Its wingspan was 290 feet, 88 meters, nearly the length of a football field laid sideways. Its smaller brother, the An-124 Ruslan, runs over 65 feet to the top of the tail. And on both of them, the cockpit sits even higher than usual, up on an upper deck above the entire cargo hold, because the nose swings open like a gate so that tanks and trucks can drive straight inside. Why build something like this at all? Because there's no other way. A power plant turbine, a locomotive, the fuselage of another airplane, a satellite. You either ship it by sea for weeks, or you lift it into the air in a single flight. A giant isn't a designer's vanity project. It's the answer to one question. How do you lift the unliftable? Except somebody pays for that answer. And the one who pays is that person up top, in a cockpit 5 stories off the ground. Because the bigger the machine, the less it listens. Take the Ruslan's landing gear. It doesn't have 4 wheels or 6. It has 24. 2 twin-wheel units up front and 5 units down each side. And the whole thing can kneel. The airplane lowers its body toward the ground and changes its angle so that heavy equipment can roll inside on its own. 24 wheels, and the pilot can't see a single one of them. Now add wind. In a strong crosswind, a heavy jet is flown toward the runway sideways. The nose turned into the gusts, so that from the outside, it looks like the airplane is flying at an angle. Pilots call it exactly that, crabbing. On a long jet, the cockpit has to be held off to one side of the centerline, so that the wheels, trailing far behind, touch down in the middle and not off in the grass. The pilot aims at one spot and lands at another. So here's a human being, 5 stories up, 50 feet above the concrete, flying a 500,000-pound machine sideways toward the earth, without seeing his own wings or his own wheels. The fair question is, how does he even know where the ground is? The answer is strange. In the last seconds before touchdown, the pilot of a giant looks at the runway less and less. He lands almost blind, trusting not his eyes, but his ears, and the man sitting behind him. Who is that man? And why won't the giant land without him? The man behind the pilot is the navigator. And to understand why he's there, you first have to understand how the eyes lie to the person sitting up front. When we drive a car, we know where the hood is, where the wheels are, where the ground is. eye and body settled that deal long ago. In the cockpit of a giant, there is no such deal. On landing, the pilot's eyes sit about 27 feet, 8 meters, higher, and roughly 100 feet, 30 meters, ahead of the very wheels he's about to land on. 100 feet. The length of a basketball court separates the man's eyes from the spot where the machine will actually touch the concrete. And that's not even the cruelest part. There's a point on the windshield that seems to stay still as you descend. That, it feels, is where the airplane is flying. On a heavy jet, that point sits about 1,000 feet down the runway. But the real wheels will settle nearly 700 feet sooner. The eye says, "We'll land way over there." The machine lands almost 700 feet short of that. If the pilot believes his eyes and pulls toward that far point, he'll float over the start of the runway and plant the wheels far too long. That's why one pair of eyes isn't enough in a giant, and that's why you need a navigator. The crew of an Antonov giant is not 2 people, the way we picture a cockpit. The Ruslan was designed for 6 up on the flight deck. 2 pilots, 2 flight engineers, a radio operator, and a navigator. The Mriya was much the same. The navigator is a separate human being with one job: to fly the machine by the numbers and feed them to the people on the controls. He calculates what the pilot's eye simply cannot. And in the very last seconds, a voice joins the navigator. Not a human one, a machine voice. The radio altimeter calls out how much height is left to the ground. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. At 10 feet, it commands, "Retard, pull the thrust back." By that moment, the pilot is barely looking at the concrete at all. He's listening. The numbers in his ears are more accurate than what his eyes see from the 5th floor. The giant is landed by ear. It sounds absurd. The most clear-sighted looking person on the planet, sitting behind that huge wall of glass, higher than anyone, and in the decisive instant he closes his eyes and trusts his ears. But that's the whole logic of a big machine. Evolution tuned the human eye for human height, 5 or 6 feet off the ground. At the height of a 5th floor window, it starts to lie. And the only way not to wreck the machine is to stop believing it. This is the first crack in the story, the one everything else will turn around. The bigger the airplane, the less of it is human, and the more of it is calculation. First, it's just a navigator with tables, then a voice counting feet. And further on, as we'll see, the calculation starts taking the controls away from the human altogether. It's worth noting that the Western school in these same years went the other direction. While Antonov packed more people into the cockpit, a navigator, a second engineer, a radio operator, the West kept removing them. First, the flight engineer's seat disappeared from the wide-body cockpit. Automation took over his work. 2 people were left. 2 philosophies for the same problem. One side added humans, the other added electronics. Which of them was right? People still argue. But before a giant can fly, somebody has to learn to fly it. And there was nothing to learn on and no one to learn from, because a machine this size simply hadn't existed before. Where do you even begin when you're the first to lift a 5-story building weighing 1/3 of 1,000,000 pounds? On February 9th, 1969, the Boeing 747 flew for the first time, the first wide-body airplane in the world. At the controls sat test pilot Jack Waddell, with co-pilot Brian Weigel beside him, and flight engineer Jesse Wallach behind. The airplane was christened the City of Everett, after the town where it was built. Before this crew, no one had ever flown a passenger machine of that size. There was no one to learn from. These three were the first. And here's what Waddell said when he landed. He called the giant a two-finger airplane. To fly this monster, he said, all you needed was a thumb and a forefinger on the wheel. Not two hands, not your whole body straining. 2 fingers. The largest flying machine of its day obeyed more easily than aircraft a tenth its size. That sounds reassuring. It also sounds like a trap. Because it was a trap. To grasp the scale of what Waddell lifted, you need one number. The 747, fully loaded, came in around 735,000 pounds, almost twice the weight of its predecessor, the Boeing 707. Not 10% more, not half again, double. This wasn't the next step. It was a leap across a chasm. Factories had to be rebuilt for it. The old halls simply couldn't hold it. Airports had to be rebuilt. And crews had to be trained from scratch on a problem no one had faced. What it feels like to fly a building moving at 550 miles an hour. Here was the real difficulty of those years. The machine was built, but there was nothing to train pilots on. Simulators of that class didn't exist. They had to be created from nothing, knowing all the while that crews would be learning to land a building none of them had ever seen. Airlines were nervous about the 747 at first. Too big, too heavy, too unlike anything before it. Nobody knew for certain how all that mass would behave in a real flight, in pouring rain, in a crosswind, on an icy runway. The first generation of giant pilots, in a real sense, finished their training in the air, with passengers behind them. Now back to those 2 fingers. Where does the lightness come from, if the machine weighs as much as 500 cars? The secret is that the pilot's hands aren't connected to the control surfaces directly. Hydraulics sit in between, a power assist, like power steering in a car, only thousands of times stronger. The pilot doesn't move the surfaces with his own muscle. He just gives the hydraulics a command, and they swing the enormous panels. And the resistance the pilot feels on the wheel is artificial. It's deliberately fed in so the human has something to push against. The machine could, in fact, obey with no resistance at all. And right here is the root of all a giant's troubles. The pilot's hand feels lightness. But the physics says the opposite. Under that lightness sit hundreds of tons of metal living by their own laws. A light control wheel lies, just as the eye lies, from the 5th floor. It says, the machine is obedient. Do as you please. But the machine is not obedient. It just hasn't shown its temper yet. Waddell knew that. An experienced test pilot can feel the difference between an airplane that's easy to command and an airplane that's actually light. A novice can't. A novice trusts his fingers. And that's the central danger of learning on a giant. Everything feels simple right up until the moment it's too late. Because a building weighing 1/3 pounds has one property a light aircraft doesn't. One no hydraulics can cancel out. A property that can turn a casual 2-finger movement into a killer. A giant doesn't react right away. First, it thinks. Push an empty shopping cart and it moves the instant you touch it. Push one loaded to the top and it'll roll, but not right away. You lean into it, and for a moment, nothing happens. The mass resists. It takes a beat. Now multiply that cart by 10,000. When the pilot of a giant moves the control wheel, a noticeable pause opens up between his input and the machine's response. Not fractions of a second, the way it is on a light airplane. A real, physically felt delay. Hundreds of tons of metal refuse to change direction on the first request. The machine seems to mull it over. It got the command, and it thinks before it starts to turn or bank. Pilots put it plainly. A heavy airplane thinks. Because of that pause, flying a giant is backwards from what common sense suggests. On a light airplane, you move the controls when you want to turn. On a heavy one, you can't. Wait for the moment, and you've missed it, because the machine will start obeying after the moment has passed. So the pilot of a giant commands not what he needs now, but what he'll need 2 seconds from now. He isn't flying the present. He's flying the future. There's a flip side to that rule, just as treacherous. Since the machine is slow to start a maneuver, it's just as slow to stop one. You command a bank and take your hand off in time, and the giant keeps rolling on its own momentum because the mass you set spinning now has to be stopped just as far in advance. The pilot is holding a conversation with someone who answers 2 seconds late. You can't rattle on. You can't correct on the fly. Every word has to be weighed ahead of time. Experienced pilots say it about every heavy machine. You have to fly ahead of the airplane. Don't chase its reactions. Get out in front of them, always holding in your head where the machine will be in 2 seconds, in 5, in 10. Now stack up everything we have so far. The eye lies from the 5th floor. The light wheel lies, hiding the mass. And the mass itself answers late, and settles down just as late. 3 lies at once, and the pilot has to hold all 3 in his head, working ahead of the machine by the instruments, by the altimeter's voice, by the navigator's calls, against his own instincts. And all of that is just to fly straight and land smoothly. But those hundreds of tons aren't there for nothing. This machine exists to lift what no one else will lift. A turbine the size of a house, the finished fuselage of another airplane, equipment that would otherwise spend a month at sea. A giant is always a bargain. Enormous capability, traded for handling that hangs at the very edge of human ability. As long as that bargain holds, all is well. The machine is heavy, but predictable. Give the command, wait, get the result. Patience and calculation beat inertia. But inertia has an evil twin. Sometimes the machine doesn't just lag behind your command. It starts answering on its own, with no command at all. A wing suddenly takes on a life of its own. The nose wanders off to the side. The airplane rocks from wing to wing, and each swing is bigger than the last. And any attempt by the pilot to catch it by hand only makes it worse. This has a name, and because of it, a giant can tear itself apart in midair. It has a name, Dutch roll, named for the way an ice skater glides, rocking from foot to foot, weaving side to side. Here's what happens to the machine. A big airplane has swept wings, angled back like the head of an arrow. That's for speed, but it has a side effect. Nudge the machine a little, and one wing starts to yaw the nose one way, while the airplane rolls onto the other wing. Then the same thing in reverse. Then harder. The tail weaves like a swimming snake, and the swings keep growing. The airplane is rocking itself. And here's where the inertia we talked about comes in. A giant has enormous mass, so the swings are slow. But that's exactly why they're nearly impossible to stop by hand. A heavy pendulum is hard to start and just as hard to settle. Worse, if the pilot tries to catch that rocking with the wheel, he'll almost certainly be out of step. The machine answers late, remember? He'll push right when the wing has already gone right on its own, and add to the swing instead of damping it. A human, trying to save the machine by hand, speeds the disaster up. So it isn't a human who catches Dutch roll. It's an automatic system, the yaw damper, a small invisible box that, with no input from the pilot, nudges the rudder in tiny doses, killing the rocking at its very birth, faster than a human could even notice it. On big machines, this automation runs at all times. And here's the first crucial turn in our story. Without it, a swept-wing giant at full speed simply could not fly in peace. Which means the human stopped flying such a machine barehanded long ago. There has always been electronics between his movement and the controls, quietly correcting for him. What happens when that protection fails was shown not long ago. In 2024, a Boeing 737 belonging to one airline was found with structural damage after an episode of Dutch roll in flight. The machine weaved its tail, and that was enough to bend metal. And the 737 is far from the biggest, but the harshest truth about the limits of strength was told by an American military giant, the Lockheed C-5 Galaxy. Its huge, flexible wing bends constantly in rough air, and metal grows tired. When the wing of one of the highest-time airframes was taken apart, they found cracks. The engineers ran the numbers and grabbed their heads. It turned out that only about 10% of the entire fleet, out of 79 machines, would reach their rated service life of 19,000 hours without cracks in the wing. 9 machines out of 10 threatened to crack early. The giant was, quite literally, at risk of tearing itself apart. Not from any impact, but simply from its own loads, flight after flight. Again, the answer was sought in electronics. The Galaxy got an active system that, reading its sensors, played the wing's own surfaces to damp gusts before they could load the metal. Tests in 1973 showed it worked. The rocking could be tamed. In the mid-70s, the system went on to 77 machines. But look how it ended. The electronics alone weren't enough. In the end, the Galaxy's wing had to be rebuilt entirely. A new center section, new structure, and improved alloys. The clever automation only bought time. The structure itself had to be fixed. Let's remember that. Electronics save a giant from itself, but they're not all-powerful. And now let's step back in time to an age when there was no automation at all, when nothing stood between a human and a many-ton machine but hydraulics and his own muscles. And when the hydraulics failed, muscle was the last thing holding the machine in the air. On February 27, 1965, a machine took off that you heard before you saw. The An-124 Anti, the largest turboprop airplane in the world, then and to this day. The first wide-body transport on the planet, arriving before the word even existed. 4 engines designed by Kuznetsov, 15,000 horsepower each. And each one turned not a single propeller, but a pair. Contra-rotating props on a common shaft, spinning against each other. That pair sliced the air into a stream so dense that the Anti was nicknamed the Flying Buzzsaw. Its roar rolled for miles ahead of the machine itself. They built 68 of them. Production ended in '76. Over its life, the Anti set more than 40 world records for cargo, for the altitude that cargo was lifted to. For its day, it wasn't just big, it was the biggest, by a wide margin. But the Anti matters to us not for its size or its sound. It matters because it was a giant of muscle, not electronics. A machine from the era when there were no smart boxes between the human and the controls, only hydraulics and hands. To understand what that meant, you have to recall how a big machine is actually controlled. The control surfaces are enormous panels the size of barn doors. A human can't move them directly against the rush of air. There isn't enough strength. So hydraulics swing them, a power assist. The pilot just gives the command. The machine supplies the muscle. As long as the assist works, it's all easy. Those famous 2 fingers. And if the assist fails, then machines of that era had one last resort, a direct link. The surface connected to the levers in the cockpit straight through with no helper. And now, to deflect those many-ton panels, the human had to overpower the rush of oncoming air himself with his own body. The bigger the machine and the higher the speed, the heavier the levers became. Not heavy like lifting a weight, heavy enough that sometimes the pilot and co-pilot hauled together, 4 hands on the controls, feet braced. That's why the crews of giants in that era were often strong, physically powerful men. Not button operators, but laborers in the full sense of the word. Flying a big machine without automation could be physical work that soaked your shirt through. And the Ante, with its wingspan and its mass, belonged squarely to that world. A world where a machine's reliability was measured, in part, by whether the people in the cockpit had the strength to hold it. It's worth sitting with that image. An enormous machine, a wing you could walk along, hanging in the air, and in the cockpit, 2 men holding the levers 4-handed, the way sailors hold a ship's wheel in a storm. Not pressing a button, not asking a computer, hauling. And whether they had the strength and the coordination decided whether they, and everything the machine carried, stayed in the air. Today it seems almost medieval, but that's exactly how the giants of that era flew, on an honest, direct, heavy bond between human and metal, with no go-between. And here is where the central argument of our whole story is born, because that world has its own pride and its own truth. A pilot who holds the machine by muscle feels it through his whole body. He knows, by the weight of the lever, what the airplane is doing right now. The machine talks to him through his hands. Heavy means fast. Dead weight means something's wrong. Go find out. It's an honest, direct line between human and metal. But you pay for that honesty in sweat and risk. Get tired, run out of strength, make a mistake, and a many-ton machine goes where you didn't want it. So what if you remove the levers entirely? What if you put a computer between the human and the machine? One that supplies the muscle and won't let you make a mistake. Lift the weight off the pilot, but take away with it that very feel of the machine in his hands. The aviation world fell out badly over that question at the end of the 20th century, and the argument hasn't been settled yet. The argument split the world of big airplanes into 2 schools, and the easiest place to see it is one detail in the cockpit, what the pilot's hand holds onto. In the cockpit of the Airbus A380, the largest passenger airplane in the world, there is no familiar control wheel in front of your chest. In its place, off to the side, under the left hand, is a little stick, a side stick. And it's linked to the controls not by cables or rods, but by wires. It's called fly-by-wire. Quite literally, we fly by the wire. What does that change? Almost everything. The pilot of an A380, moving that side stick, isn't commanding the surfaces directly. He's telling the computer what he wants. This much bank, this much G-force, and how far to deflect the surfaces to get it, the machine works out for itself. Between the human's hand and the wing, there now sits a translator, a processor. And that translator has the right to argue with the pilot. The Airbus school builds in flight envelope protection. The computer simply won't let the human drive the machine past a dangerous line. It won't let him stall it, exceed its speed, its G limit, or roll into too steep a bank. Haul the stick back with all your strength, and the machine will raise the nose exactly as far as is safe, and not 1 degree more. In the critical instant, the electronics physically refuse to let the human's hand go where the machine would break. This approach has a price, and it's the part people argue over loudest. The side stick is mute. It doesn't push back, doesn't transmit force, and the co-pilot can't feel through his own stick what the captain is doing. Their side sticks aren't linked to each other. One can pull one way, and the other the opposite way, and they won't feel it in their hands. The bond between human and machine, and between human and human, now runs not through the body, but through screens and the logic of the computer. The other school, Boeing, Antonov, kept the control wheel. Heavy, classic, in front of the chest. And the two pilots' wheels are rigidly linked. Move one, and the second moves in sync. Each one sees and feels in his hands what his partner is doing. The force on the wheel grows with speed. The faster you fly, the harder it is to pull. The machine reminds you through your hands that it's sped up, and the limits here are soft. The computer advises, warns, resists, but if the pilot decides he must and applies the force, he can push through the restriction. The final word stays with the human. There's the whole argument in one sentence. Who gets the final word when seconds count? The human or the algorithm? The difference isn't theoretical. You feel it in your hands. Picture this. The co-pilot, by mistake, pulls his wheel back, and the captain didn't notice. In a cockpit with linked wheels that's impossible to miss, the captain's wheel moves back on its own, bumps his palms, and his body understands instantly, something's wrong. My partner is pulling. In a cockpit with mute side sticks, that same mistake can go entirely unnoticed. The sticks are independent, nothing twitches, and you learn of the other man's error only from the machine's behavior or a message on a screen, when the time, perhaps, is already lost. One school trusts the body and the direct sensation. The other trusts screens and logic. And both are right in their own way. Right up until the instant everything goes wrong. There's no settling this argument at a desk. Only catastrophes settle it. Those rare minutes when everything breaks at once and it becomes clear who was right. On November 4th, 2010, such a minute arrived. Over the sea, 4 minutes after takeoff, the largest passenger airplane in the world began to come apart. A 5-story building with hundreds of people inside genuinely started going down. And in the cockpit, human and computer came face to face. Qantas Flight 32 left Singapore that morning. On board the Airbus A380, 469 people. The machine was climbing, everything routine. And 4 minutes after takeoff, over the islands, one of its 4 engines blew apart from the inside. This is the most terrifying kind of failure, an uncontained one. It didn't quit. It didn't catch fire on the outside. Inside the engine, at full power, a turbine disc shattered into pieces. Fragments of metal flew off in every direction at more than 4,000 miles an hour, faster than a rifle bullet. And that shrapnel ripped through the wing. It punched the fuel tanks, damaged the landing gear, cut electrical wiring and part of the control runs. One piece went up, another into the wing, a third into the systems the machine can't fly without. Now picture the cockpit. A 5-story building packed with people, damaged in flight. And in front of the crew unfolds the very thing our whole argument about human and computer was about. The smart electronics of the A380 did exactly what they were designed to do. They saw the damage instantly and reported it. The trouble was that there was so much damage, the machine buried the pilots in an avalanche. Failure messages poured onto the screens by the dozen, one after another, faster than a human can read them. The computer honestly listed everything that had broken and very nearly buried the crew under its own reports. The protection meant to help became a waterfall of alarms. And here, it was no longer processors that mattered, but people. The machine was flown by Captain Richard de Crepigny, and in the cockpit that day was an augmented crew. Several experienced pilots at once, as it happened. They did not rush to blindly obey the machine's every instruction. They did the opposite. They stopped, and they began to work it out. For nearly 2 hours, the wounded giant circled over the sea while the people in the cockpit sorted through what still worked and what had failed for good. They counted how much fuel was left in the punctured tanks, whether the mained wing could take a landing, whether the runway was long enough. They set aside part of what the electronics were screaming at them and decided for themselves. And then they landed the machine, heavy, wounded, with part of its systems gone, back at Singapore. Not one person died. The investigation later found the cause, and it was the size of a factory defect. In the engine that came apart was one small oil feed pipe, manufactured with a wall too thin. Because of that, a fatigue crack started in it. That was all. The thinnest of defects in a single part, and a machine weighing nearly 600 tons with hundreds of people aboard hung on the edge. A giant capable of lifting the unliftable turned out to be vulnerable to a tiny error in a pipe you'd struggle to even see in your hand. This story has everything we're telling it for. The computer saw the disaster instantly and nearly drowned the people in a flood of reports. The people worked it out where the machine could only list, but without the instruments and systems of the machine itself, they'd have gone down blind. They were saved not by electronics against the human, nor by the human against electronics. They were saved because, in the crucial minute, there was enough of both. Which of them was in charge is a question this flight gives no answer to. It only shows, alone, neither would have made it. But you know what's bitterest in the story of giants? This catastrophe in the sky, the crew beat. And most often, the biggest machines in the world crash not in flight at all. They crash on the ground, without even getting airborne. There's a grim joke among pilots of big machines. Getting a giant into the air is easier than getting it from the gate to the runway. In the air, there's emptiness around the machine, open space, miles to anything. On the ground, it squeezes between other airplanes, buildings, light poles, down taxiways that barely fit it. And the central problem, the pilot can't see his own wings. That's not a figure of speech. It's the conclusion of an official inquiry. Investigators wrote it down plainly. On big machines, the Boeing 747 and the 757 and the 767 and the 777 and the Airbus A380, the crew cannot see the tips of their own wings from the cockpit at all. To see the tip of his own wing, a pilot has to open the side window and stick his head outside. There's the scale of the problem. A human guides a machine with a wing the length of a football field down a narrow taxiway and can't see where that wing ends. What that leads to is known by name. On April 11, 2011, at New York's Kennedy Airport, an Air France Airbus A380 was taxiing out for takeoff. With its left wingtip, it clipped the tail of a small regional jet, a Bombardier, parked nearby, and spun it around like a toy. Both pilots of the giant later testified, on the record, that they never saw the smaller machine before the impact. A 100-ton monster brushed its neighbor and didn't even feel it. A little over 2 years later, in December 2013, a Boeing 747 of British Airways at Johannesburg turned onto the wrong taxiway and struck a building with its right wing. The wing was wrecked. The building was wrecked. 4 people on the ground were hurt. One wrong turn, and a 200-foot wingspan becomes a battering ram. The engineers, of course, looked for a solution. That same A380 was fitted with external cameras on the fin, on the tail, under the nose, so the crew could see where the rear gear was rolling. A sound idea. But here's what turned out. Even those cameras don't show the wingtips. The picture cuts off before it reaches the most dangerous ends. There are cameras, and the blind spot stays exactly where it kills. And now, the very truth in numbers this was all worth telling for. After the New York collision, investigators pulled the records, and they counted not 1, not 2, at least 12 cases since 1993 in which pilots of big machines could not judge whether their wing would clear an obstacle. 12 investigations in nearly 20 years. And the conclusion was harsh. The cameras in service are not enough, and the ones that were fitted weren't even recording. The problem of the wing's blind zones, it turns out, was never closed. People simply learned to live with it. It went so far that the world began rebuilding its airports around the size of these machines. For the A380, with its wingspan of about 260 feet, a top category of airport was introduced, with its own requirements for the width of runways and taxiways. Just to accept such an airplane, airports spent tens of millions. Singapore's Changi alone put in around 60 million reworking its terminals. The machine grew so large that the ground is fitted to it, not the other way around. And here's where we've arrived, having taken the giant apart from every side. The human eye lies from the 5th floor. The hands can't keep up with the inertia of hundreds of tons. The wing rocks itself, and an automatic system holds it. And on the ground, the pilot sees neither his wheels nor his wings. By every measure, the human is no longer a match for this machine. It has outgrown his abilities in every direction at once. And yet, it was the human who dreamed it up, lifted it, and lands it to this day. Why? What makes people build, again and again, machines at the very edge of their own strength? To answer that, let's look at the biggest of them all, the one that's gone. Her name was Maria. In Ukrainian, that means dream. The An-124 was the only one in the world. A single example was built. A second was left unfinished in the shop. And that one machine held records no one ever broke. The heaviest aircraft in all of aviation history, a maximum takeoff weight of 640 tons, and the largest wingspan of any flying machine, 290 feet, across, nearly the length of a football field. It had everything we've talked about for 10 chapters, a cockpit at the height of a 6th-floor window where the eye lies, the inertia that makes the machine think, a wing you have to protect from itself, wheels and wingtips the pilot can't see. The Maria was the summit of this madness, the largest bet a human ever placed against his own limits. And it wasn't built for a record in a book. The Maria, like its brother the Ruslan, existed to lift what no one else could. A turbine for a power plant, a whole locomotive, the finished fuselage of another airplane, oversized loads that would otherwise spend months dragged by sea and land. One flight of a giant replaced a convoy. For that, they accepted every compromise at once: the lying eye, the lagging mass, the wing you can't see. The machine was built at the edge of the possible precisely because the task was beyond the ordinary, and it didn't die in the sky. On February 27, 2022, on the third day of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the only Maria burned in its hangar at Hostomel, near Kyiv. The largest airplane on the planet, a machine that neither inertia nor crosswind nor blind spots could defeat, died on the ground in its own home without ever rising into the air that day. Antonov has said the machine will be built anew. The estimate? Around $500 million and years of work. Whether it happens, time will tell. And now, at the very end, we can return to the question we started with. The airplane has grown too big for human hands. So which is more frightening? That such a giant is almost impossible to fly by hand? Or that the human is trusted to fly it less and less? We've seen both truths. We've seen a wing that an automatic system holds because the human won't be fast enough. We've seen a computer that won't let the pilot's hand cross a fatal line. And we've seen a flight over Singapore where that very computer choked, and it was people, unafraid to overrule it, who saved everyone. It seems there is no correct answer here. There's a line that all of big aviation balances along. Trust the machine a little more, and the human loses the feel of flight. Leave the human a little more, and one day the strength or the attention runs out. And with every new giant, that line shifts toward the machine. But the Maria is a reminder of something else. Her name, Dream, is no accident. A human builds a flying building not because it's convenient or safe. Just the opposite. It's awkward, costly, frightening, and it stands at the very edge of the possible. He builds it because he wants to lift what cannot be lifted. The eye lies. The hands can't keep up. The wing is out of sight. And still he climbs into a cockpit 5 stories up and guides the monster down to Earth. Not in spite of his limits, but to push them back. A giant lives right on the line where human strength ends and human trust in the machine begins. And as long as the human is willing to step out onto that line, there will be new Ruslans and new Marias. The only question is, who will be sitting in that cockpit 50 years from now? A human who still feels the machine in his hands, or no one at all.